You have always thought of yourself as the one who absorbs rather than attacks, the one who bends rather than breaks, the one who understands rather than retaliates. This self-image has been woven into the fabric of your identity so deeply that to imagine acting otherwise feels like a betrayal of your own nature. Yet there comes a moment in certain lives, a rare and almost alchemical moment, when the empath, pushed into the farthest corner of the psychic labyrinth, begins to mirror the tactics of the very force that has long been their shadowed adversary. And here, my friend, is where the psyche awakens to its most unsettling confrontation. What happens when the dove dons the feathers of the hawk? Understand, first, that this is not a mere behavioral shift. It is a crossing of an archetypal threshold. The narcissist and the empath are not simply two personality types wandering through the marketplace of human character. They are constellations, arrangements of psychic energies mirroring one another in distorted symmetry. The empath swims in the waters of feeling, attuned to the tremors beneath the surface. The narcissist constructs a fortress, a solar citadel, whose walls reflect and refract the light of others into the patterns they alone dictate. When the empath borrows a narcissist's tactics, they are not simply adopting a strategy. They are stepping across the membrane that separates their conscious self from a repressed counterpart. The shadow that has been waiting with ancient patience. You see, the unconscious does not care for the labels we attach to our roles. It cares only for wholeness. And wholeness is not light alone. If you have been the healer, the giver, the one who endures, your unconscious is already pregnant with the opposite assertion, even domination and a fierce capacity to wound. That is the alchemical paradox. In resisting the darker aspect, you nourish it in secret. This is why, when the empath finally reaches for the narcissist's arsenal, it can feel frighteningly natural, as if some deep instinct, long chained in the cellar of the psyche, has finally been allowed to stretch its limbs in dreams. I have seen this archetypal switch symbolized in curious ways. A woman who has spent her life caring for a domineering partner dreams she is wearing the partner's coat, thick, heavy, smelling of smoke. In the dream, she finds herself speaking with their voice, issuing commands, feeling a sudden heat of power in her chest. She wakes unsettled, almost ill, yet also with a peculiar sense of liberation. The coat is a symbol of psychic transference of the empath, temporarily clothing themselves in the persona of their shadow's mirror. But beware, what is worn long enough may begin to shape the body that wears it. The narcissist's tactics, gaslighting, reframing reality, withholding, strategic silence are not inventions of malice alone. They are survival strategies, crystallized over years, often born in the crucible of their own wounding. To use them as an empath is to borrow a mask forged in fire, one that does not fit your features without strain. At first, it may feel like a weapon of justice. Finally, you can resist without collapsing. Finally, you can confuse the one who has always confused you. But on the deeper level, this is a dialogue between archetypes. You are engaging not merely with a person, but with the ancient pattern of the trickster, the magician of the shadow realm, who lives in both of you. Here lies the danger and the initiation. The act of mirroring the narcissist awakens the trickster in you, and the trickster does not easily return to sleep. In myth, those who consort with the trickster often gain cunning, insight, even the gift of seeing the seams of the world, but they also risk losing their own moral compass, drifting in a sea where deception becomes as natural as breathing. The empath's virtue has always been transparency of feeling. To hide, to manipulate, is to step into an alien atmosphere. Some find they cannot breathe there for long. Others, to their own astonishment, discover they can breathe there too well, and therein lies the seduction. When the empath uses the narcissist's tactics, the narcissist often reacts with a primal recognition, like a predator, suddenly meeting another predator's gaze. It destabilizes them, for the game relies on asymmetry. The narcissist feeds on the openness of the empath. When that openness is replaced by mirrored maneuvers, the narcissist's script is interrupted. They may retreat, rage, or escalate, but something more profound happens within you. You feel the surge of agency that comes from speaking in the language of the one who once silenced you. It can feel intoxicating, even holy, like a long-delayed justice. But here is the question that must be faced in the inner tribunal of your soul. At what cost? For every tactic borrowed, a part of the psyche must adapt to carry it. If you use the weapon of cold withdrawal, you must allow a part of yourself to freeze. If you deploy calculated silence, you must train a part of your heart to withhold its natural impulse to reach. If you bend reality to protect yourself, you must also bend your own perception until truth becomes negotiable. The unconscious will not allow you to play such a role without extracting a price. Yet, paradoxically, this very dance can serve individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. For to confront the shadow is not merely to observe it from a distance, but to wear it, feel its weight, taste its language. The danger lies not in the wearing, but in forgetting to take it off. The empath who returns from this journey with awareness becomes something new, no longer a passive receiver, but a conscious wielder of both light and dark. They learn boundaries not as walls of ice, but as sacred geometry, clear lines that can be defended without the need for cruelty. They can look into the eyes of the narcissist and no longer see a towering oppressor, but a soul trapped in their own armor, fighting shadows they dare not name. I tell you this, the unconscious delights in such reversals, for they are its theater. The meek confronting the tyrant with the tyrant's own sword is an old motif found in myth, folklore, and dreams, but every such tale warns of the same truth, that the sword must be returned to the earth. lest it consume the one who wields it. You must know when the act of defense ends and the slow art of healing begins. To stay too long in the narcissist's skin is to risk forgetting the feel of your own. This is not simply about survival in a single relationship. It is about the evolution of your psychic architecture. The empath who has touched the shadow of the narcissist within themselves has crossed into the realm of the alchemist. They have seen that power is not inherently evil, nor is sensitivity inherently weak. They have glimpsed that what they feared in the other was, in truth, a part of themselves, distorted, unintegrated, but nonetheless theirs. And once you have seen this, you can never again cling to the purity of your old identity. You are now a creature of paradox, and paradox, my friend, is the very fabric of the soul's unfolding. There is a moment, subtle yet seismic, when the empath first recognizes that the tactics they have borrowed from the narcissist are beginning to shape their inner landscape. It often arrives in the quiet after the storm, when the battle of wills has subsided and the room falls still. You hear your own voice echoing back from memory sharp, calculated, edged with an intention that does not feel entirely yours, and you ask yourself, have I crossed a line, or have I finally stepped onto sacred ground? This is where the psyche begins its most delicate negotiation. For the unconscious does not work in absolutes. It trades in symbols, in shades of truth, in the subtle weaving of light into dark. To borrow the weapons of the narcissist is to enter their symbolic world, and this has consequences. In dreams, this often appears as crossing into a fortress or palace that does not belong to you. You may find yourself walking through corridors of polished stone, the air heavy with incense, the walls lined with mirrors that reflect not your face but another's. These dream images are not mere fantasies. They are the soul's way of showing you that you have stepped into an archetypal domain where identity can be slippery. In such a place, the risk is not simply losing your way, it is losing your name. The narcissist's realm is one of control through narrative, a constant reshaping of perception. To serve the image they must uphold. When you, as an empath, enter that realm, you are walking into the same hall of mirrors, but with one advantage. You carry the memory of the forest outside, the air beyond the walls, the reality that exists beyond distortion. The key is to keep that memory alive. The moment you forget it, you become another resident of the palace, convinced the mirrors are windows and the stone corridors, the only paths in existence. I must tell you, the unconscious will test you here. It will whisper, why not stay here? You cannot be hurt. Here, you are untouchable. And indeed, the armor of narcissistic tactics can feel like invincibility. For the first time, the barbs that once pierced your skin glance off harmlessly. The cold withdrawal that once shattered you now becomes your shield. The calculated reframing of events that once left you spinning now lies in your own hands. A tool you can wield with precision. But remember, in the archetypal theater, every gift has its curse. The shield can also become a prison, the tool can turn in your grasp and cut you instead. In the deeper layers of the psyche, there is no moral judgment attached to these tactics. The unconscious does not label them as good or evil. It sees them as psychic functions, defense mechanisms that can be used by any archetype. What matters is the degree of consciousness with which they are employed. If you act without awareness, you are merely possessed by the shadow, a puppet in its theater. But if you act with full awareness, you can touch the shadow without being consumed, wield its power without surrendering your soul. This is the narrow path, the razor's edge that individuation demands. Consider the myth of Persephone. She was taken into the underworld, into the realm of Hades, where the rules of the surface world no longer applied. She did not escape unchanged. She ate the pomegranate seeds, binding herself to that realm. In the same way, when you adopt the narcissist tactics, you ingest the fruit of their word. A part of you will always remember the taste. The danger is not in having tasted it, but in forgetting that you also belong to another kingdom, the living world above. To navigate both realms is the mark of the initiate. You may find during this crossing that you encounter anger, long buried. For the empath, anger often hides behind layers of compassion, justification, even self-blame. But when you use the narcissist's tactics, you may feel that anger rising, no longer a suppressed ember, but a controlled flame. This can be a revelation. You are not merely gentle, you are also fierce. And perhaps this is what the shadow wanted to show you all along, that your survival does not require you to stay in the posture of perpetual softness, that there is a sacred warrior within you, and the narcissist's armor, though dangerous, can help you find its shape. Yet there is a final lesson in this stage of the journey, to discern when the battle is over. The narcissist lives in a constant state of siege, always anticipating attack, always ready to strike first or manipulate the terrain. The empath, if they remain in this mode too long, risks forgetting the open fields, the spaces where love flows without calculation. You must learn to set down the weapons when they are no longer needed, to walk away from the fortress and return to the garden. If you cannot, you will find that the very tactics that once saved you will begin to isolate you from those who would never have harmed you in the first place. This is the paradox that individuation demands you hold. You must be able to wear the shadow without becoming it, to use its tools without moving into its house. Integration is not about exile, it is about relationship. You do not banish the shadow, you learn its language, its needs, its fears. You become the bridge between your own light and dark, and in doing so, you gain a power. The narcissist themselves does not have the power of choice. When the empath uses the narcissist's tactics with consciousness, they break the old dynamic. They show the narcissist that the game no longer works, that the roles have shifted, that the prey has learned to look the predator in the eye. But more importantly, they show themselves that they are not bound to a single identity. They can be healer and warrior, giver and defender, open-hearted and impenetrable, all without losing the thread of their own soul. This, my friend, is the true revolution. And it does not happen in the outer theater of conflict, but in the quiet chambers of the inner self, where the archetypes meet, clash, and finally recognize each other as kin. There is an aftershock to such encounters, one that ripples through the soul long after the confrontation has ended. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It arrives in dreams, in sudden silences, in the way your body feels when you enter a room that once made you small. The unconscious, having witnessed your crossing into the shadows terrain, now begins the slow work of rebalancing. This is not the rush of victory, but the sober integration of experience. The psyche does not care for the triumph of ego. It seeks only that the opposites within you find their place in the greater mandala of the self. You may dream of masks now, beautiful, intricate, heavy masks that you try on before a mirror. In one dream, the mask may fit perfectly, and you feel powerful, almost divine. In another, the mask begins to fuse with your skin, and you panic, clawing to remove it. These are not just idle stories spun by the night. They are the soul's symbolic commentary on what you have done. The mask is the tactic, the borrowed identity, the temporary armor. The dream is asking, will you know when to take it off? Will you remember the face beneath? In waking life, you may notice a strange duality. There is a new steadiness in your spine, a refusal to collapse under pressure. Where once a cutting remark would send you spiraling into self-doubt, now you meet it with a level gaze, unshaken. And yet there is also a subtle wariness in you, a readiness to defend that may rise even when no attack is coming. This is the shadow's residue. Once awakened, it does not return to the deep without leaving traces. You will need to cultivate discernment to recognize when the energy of battle is necessary and when it is merely a ghost of old wars. Understand that the narcissist tactics are not simply actions. They are expressions of an entire psychic orientation. They spring from an inner conviction that the world is unsafe, that vulnerability is a liability, that control is the only guarantee of survival. When you used those tactics, even for a just cause, you touched that orientation, felt its logic from the inside. That knowledge is dangerous because it is seductive. It offers a clear, cold order to the chaos of human interaction, but it is also a prison with invisible bars. The narcissist lives there always. You must not. The deeper work now is not in resisting the narcissist, but in speaking with a part of yourself that found those tactics useful. What did it want? Perhaps it wanted safety. Perhaps it wanted to be seen as strong, untouchable. Perhaps it wanted revenge for years of quiet suffering. None of these desires are evil in themselves. They are the cries of an inner child who has been told too often to stay silent. To integrate this experience, you must meet that child not as a rescuer who promises they will never be hurt again, but as a wise parent who teaches them that power need not come at the expense of humanity. In myth, this stage is often represented by the hero returning from the underworld, carrying something of the realm they visited. Persephone returns with the seeds, Orpheus with the memory of Eurydice's touch, Inanna with the knowledge of her own mortality, you to return with something, the knowledge of the shadow's language. You cannot unlearn it. And so the question becomes, how will you use it to manipulate and control, as the narcissist does, or to protect without closing your heart? This is the difference between possession by the shadow and conscious alliance with it. In the mystical dimension of the psyche, every archetype longs for wholeness. Even the narcissist's inner architecture, for all its rigidity, is a defensive shell around a wounded core. When you mirrored their tactics, you showed them, consciously or not, that you could enter their world and still remain yourself. This can be unsettling for them because it suggests a freedom they do not possess. They may rage, they may withdraw, they may attempt to pull you back into the old roles, but something has already shifted. You have seen them without the aura of power they once held over you. And more importantly, you have seen yourself without the chains you once wore. The energetic body feels this transformation before the mind fully grasps it. You may notice a new alignment, a grounding in the solar plexus, a heat in the chest that is not merely anger but presence. This is the awakening of the inner warrior, a force that was always yours but lay dormant beneath a persona of perpetual giver. The task now is to keep that warrior in dialogue with the healer, to ensure that the sword and the open hand both remain within reach. Too much of one without the other, and you will lose the balance that individuation requires. And so, my friend, we come to the paradox at the heart of this journey. You have not changed sides in some eternal war between light and dark. You have discovered that both armies march under your own banner. The empath and the narcissist are not separate species. They are expressions of the same human soul, split along the fault lines of early wounds and archetypal predisposition. By daring to use the tactics of the narcissist, you have bridged that split for a moment. Now, the work is to make that bridge a permanent structure so that you can walk between these inner territories without fear, without losing yourself, and without needing to destroy the other, the deeper truth, which only reveals itself after the dust of confrontation has settled, is that this crossing was never truly about the narcissist at all. They were the stage, the mirror, the necessary antagonist, but the play was written long before you met them. The script belongs to the self, the central organizing principle of the psyche, which arranges encounters not to punish or reward, but to awaken. And awakening, as you now know, is rarely gentle. In the language of the soul, such an encounter is an initiation rite. You were brought to the edge of your identity, stripped of your familiar garments of empathy and tenderness, and asked to Step into the costume of the shadow. This was not cruelty, it was alchemy. The lead of your passivity was placed into the crucible of conflict and, under the heat of necessity, began to turn to gold. The gold is not aggression, it is sovereignty. It is the knowing that you can move between softness and steel without losing your center. Dreams after such rites often shift in tone, where once you might have dreamed of being chased or cornered, you may now dream of standing on thresholds, holding keys, unlocking doors. The unconscious is telling you you have gained access to new chambers within yourself. Sometimes these keys open peaceful gardens, sometimes they open rooms where old ghosts wait to speak. Do not fear them. They are fragments of your own soul, exiled long ago, now ready to be reclaimed. It is here that the empath begins to feel a strange compassion for the narcissist, not the naive compassion of excusing their behavior, but the grounded compassion of one who understands the cost of living in armor. You have worn that armor now, felt its weight, seen the world through its narrow visor. You know, it keeps danger at bay, but it also keeps love out. This is not forgiveness in the moral sense. It is forgiveness in the archetypal sense, a release of the need to carry the battle into eternity. In the symbolic realm, the narcissist's fortress and the empath's open field are not separate landscapes. They are adjoining territories within the same inner kingdom. Most live their lives entirely in one or the other, never crossing the border. You have crossed it, and because of that, the walls are no longer absolute. You can retreat into strength without abandoning love. You can stand in openness without inviting invasion. This fluidity is rare. It is what makes the integrated individual feel unsettling. To those who still cling to one extreme, they cannot predict you, because you are no longer bound to a single pattern. But here lies a final temptation. Having learned the power of these tactics, you may feel the urge to test them, to see how easily you can bend situations to your will. This is the moment the shadow tests whether you have truly integrated it or simply switched masks. The narcissist uses their tactics unconsciously as a default mode of being. The integrated empath uses them consciously, sparingly, with precision, and only when they serve the health of the whole. The difference is not in the act, but in the awareness behind it. In this way, you become something. The narcissist cannot easily be a shapeshifter in the highest sense. Not the deceptive changeling of fairy tales, but the sacred shapeshifter of myth, who can move between forms because they are anchored in the formless, in dreams. This may appear as shifting between animal shapes, a hawk when clarity is needed, a wolf when boundaries are tested, a deer when gentleness is called for. These images are not fantasy. They are the psyche's way of showing you that your range has expanded. And so, when you meet the narcissist again, whether in the flesh or in some future figure who wears a similar mask, you will no longer approach as prey or even as equal combatant. You will approach as one who knows the terrain on both sides, who can see the game for what it is, without needing to play it endlessly. In that moment, you will feel a subtle shift in the air, the kind that happens when a predator realizes its target is not only watching but seeing. This is not about winning. It is about being uncatchable, not because you run, but because you no longer inhabit the field where the hunt takes place. This is the quiet mastery the self has been leading you toward, not a mastery of others, but of your own energy, your own psychic boundaries, your own capacity to hold paradox without splitting into pieces. You are no longer simply an empath or a shadow wielder. You are an initiate of the inner mysteries, one who has faced the mask and returned with the face intact. And the final gift, the one you may not even have sought, is this. You have discovered that the tactics of the narcissist, once feared, despised, or envied, are not foreign weapons at all. They are tools that have always existed in your own psyche, waiting for the moment you were ready to wield them without losing yourself. And in recognizing this, you have stepped into the wholeness that was your birthright from the beginning. There is a stillness that comes after a true initiation, a silence that is not emptiness, but fullness. You may notice it in the way the air feels heavier around you, as if the world itself recognizes that you have passed through a threshold. The people who knew you before may sense something different, though they cannot name it. Some will be drawn closer, sensing the quiet authority that now moves through you. Others will keep their distance, uneasy in the presence of a soul who has seen both light and darkness and is no longer afraid of either. Do not rush to speak of what you have learned. The most sacred transformations are not meant to be shouted from the rooftops. They are meant to be lived quietly and steadily, until the life you inhabit becomes the proof of the truth you carry. You have walked through the labyrinths of the narcissist's mind and touched the mirror that shows you your own shadowed reflection. You have worn the mask and removed it. You have felt the power and its temptation, and you have set it down without regret. These are not victories in the worldly sense. They are acts of soul maturity. In the deeper layers of the psyche, such moments are marked by symbols older than language. You may dream of crossing a bridge at dawn, the mist parting to reveal a vast expanse ahead. Or perhaps you will see yourself planting something in soil that was once barren, a sign that the territory of your inner life has been reclaimed. These dreams are not mere echoes. They are living threads from the self, reminders that what you have gained cannot be taken from you. The empath who has integrated the shadow of the narcissist is no longer simply a healer or a target. They have become a guardian. This guardianship is not over others alone, but over the sanctity of their own soul. You now know how to close the gates when danger approaches and how to open them when trust is earned. You can walk into the court of manipulation without being bound by its laws, and you can return to the open fields without longing for the armor you once wore. This is freedom, not the brittle freedom of never being hurt, but the expansive freedom of knowing that even if you will not lose yourself. And so, the narcissist's tactics, which once felt like chains in another's hands, have become in your own hands a set of finely honed tools you will use rarely, but without hesitation, when the soul's boundaries demand it. This is the essence of integration. To hold every archetype within you without being possessed by any single one, the healer and the trickster, the giver and the warrior, the open heart and the impenetrable shield, they all stand now in council within you, each with a voice, each with a place. As you step forward from this rite of passage, remember that the greatest danger is not the narcissist you may meet again, but the forgetting of what you have become. The world will tempt you back into old roles, into the simplicity of being one thing or the other. Resist that temptation. The self has no interest in simplicity. It thrives in the tension of opposites, in the dance of shadow and light. Your task is to remain in that dance, to move with it without losing your rhythm. And if in some quiet hour you feel again the old wound stir the ache of having been used, misunderstood, diminished, do not see it as a regression. See it as the bell that calls you back to the truth. You have walked through fire and returned carrying water. You have been both the prey and the predator, the hunted and the hunter, and you have emerged as neither. You are now something beyond the old names. This is the hidden grace of the journey. Not that you have conquered the narcissist, but that you have claimed the part of yourself that once cowered before them, and in doing so, you have stepped into the rarest form of power, the kind that does not need to prove itself, because it knows it was never given by another and therefore can never be taken away. Walk gently with this power. Let it shape the way you speak, the way you love, the way you stand in your own presence. And when you meet eyes, whether with friend, stranger, or adversary, let them see not just the empath who feels, nor the shadow who defends, but the whole being who has learned the secret that only such journeys can teach, that every mask is yours, every role is yours, every tactic is yours, and yet you remain yourself.